para ir para Comuna 13 de fato, isso aqui, San Javier. Agora acho que a gente provavelmente vai pegar esse teleféricozinho aqui. Era uma área muito violenta aqui, que se transformou num lugar pacífico e bom para a comunidade que vive aqui. Apesar que ele falou que ainda existem algumas gangues por aqui, mas não na proporção que existia antes.
Most marginalized areas of Medellín, especially since the 1970s, late 1970s, because we have had a civil war in Colombia since the mid-60s. Some radicalized communist guerrilla groups started fighting the government with the intention of overthrowing it. And this confrontation between the guerrillas and the military forces of Colombia pushed away many farmers, ranchers, countryside people to the major cities. The only places they had to come were these mountains around, and that's how in the 80s it became a slum. Basically it's a slum, really poor marginalized area, as I told you. And also the 80s is the most powerful moment of the Medellín cartel. They never controlled directly Comuna 13, but some small gangs that started operating here did a lot of jobs for these people of the Medellín cartels. They hired a lot of young males to work as hitmen and transporters. Behind the mountains around here, there is access to a major national road that goes to the Caribbean Sea in 8 or 10 hours, more or less. So this became also like a logistics hub for cocaine distribution for the Medellín cartel. That was during the 80s. The city was relatively peaceful because these people of the cartel controlled most of the security. But then when we entered the 90s, that was a really difficult moment for the recent history of Colombia for two reasons. First, these guerrillas that I told you had been fighting the government for 20-25 years now became really big and powerful. They were able to expand all over Colombia and control complete regions of the country. And in those regions they control, they also control the people, no? the lives dynamics of the people. They push them to collaborate with them, give them information, money, supplies. And by the early 90s, 1991, 1992, many of these farmers, ranchers and countryside people became sick and tired of dealing with the guerrillas, so they decided to finance private security, private armies. Those private armies are also really politicized. We call them paramilitaries in Colombia. But they are all the opposite of the guerrillas. As I told you, guerrillas are mostly socialist, communist, really far-left radicalized groups. And the paramilitaries all the opposite. Really far-right, fascist, conservative, radicalized groups that were created with the intention of fighting the insurgents, the guerrillas. So that brought a lot of violence in Colombia, but here in Medellín we have another important event, which was the dissolution of the Medellín cartel. Have you watched the series on Netflix? Narcos, yeah. Pablo Escobar. Yes, it's really accurate. I mean, there are some exaggerations and other things, but factually speaking, it's really accurate. So the thing is that as they showed in the series, in 1991, Pablo Escobar decided to negotiate like a truce or peace deal with the Colombian government to serve a sentence in jail, but here in Colombia and not in the United States. That was the biggest fear of the bosses from the Medellín cartel. So he went to jail in 1991, but a very special jail, let's say, because he built it from scratch with all the luxuries, all the comforts, parties going on there inside the jail. And the tipping point of the situation was when he killed two of his partners inside the jail. When he killed these two people, the government finally decided to try to send him to the United States so he could serve like a real sentence there. Of course, that was his biggest fear, as I told you before, so he decided to escape. And when he escaped, the Colombian government, along with the police and the army, and a lot of support from the DEA, were after Pablo Escobar for 16 months, and finally on December 2nd, 1983, they killed him. That's a really critical moment for the recent history of Medellín, because the city became one of the most violent in the world by the late late 90s, Medellín had one of the highest homicide rates in the world as well. And well, many people from the Medellín cartel who had been partners before, now they are enemies, they are fighting each other to control key places like this. So by early 1994, the winner of these confrontations in Comuna 13 is actually a communist guerrilla group called ELN, or Ejército de Liberación Nacional, or National Liberation Army in English. So they absorbed the remaining gangs in Comuna 13, and they kept going with many of these criminal activities, weapons dealing, drug dealing, extortions, killings. By 2002, the situation in Medellín was getting out of control. Comuna 13 was declared the most dangerous place in the world in those years. And well, in 2002, something really important happened. There was a presidential election. That new president that came to power had a much more militaristic approach towards the guerrillas. They didn't want to negotiate with them anymore, and they decided to intervene the place militarily, as you mentioned, in 2002. So during 2002, they deployed a series of military operations, but the most important one, the operation that marked the turning point of the history of Comuna 13, was called Orion Operation in October 2002, from which we have this picture. This picture is really famous. It was taken here in Comuna 13 in some of these streets that we are going to visit today. And yeah, something really, really important is happening there. Like all Colombians my age know what's going on there, and we all have seen this picture. So let me tell you a little bit what's going on there. Well, you can see there is a group of soldiers. They look really normal. All of them have their weapons, their equipment, their badges. But the man in the middle, the man who's pointing there in the middle, he looks different. He doesn't carry any weapons, no equipment, but most importantly, he's wearing a mask and he has no badges to identify himself. So well, it's been proven with further investigations that this man in the picture giving instructions to the soldiers is a member of the paramilitary groups. The thing is that these paramilitary groups kind of teamed up with the military forces, became the illegal branch, let's say, of the military forces. The dirty jobs the official army couldn't do, paramilitaries did these dirty jobs for the army. So that's what's going on in the picture. Basically, since 1999, they started infiltrating Comuna 13 and disputing the control and the power with the guerrillas. And they identified the targets, the hideouts of those people, and provided intelligence information for the military operations. Those operations in 2002, guys, honestly, were really violent, innocent people.
Paramilitary provided information to the military?
Yes. Yeah, that's been proven.
To work together against the guerrillas?
Exactly. Yeah.
And what made the guerrillas kind of rise up in the first place against the government?
Well, the guerrillas were born in the mid-1960s.
Okay.
Like just 3 years after the Cuban Revolution.
Okay.
So they were created in the middle of the Cold War, and well, the Soviet Union, and they had all these proxy wars.
Okay.
So it's part of that, like symptoms of the Cold War. So the thing is that, well, they cleansed the place, they kicked out the guerrillas in Comuna 13. The paramilitaries eventually stayed here. Some of them stayed and mutated into gangs, but I'm going to tell you some details later on. The thing is that, well, if they hadn't done those military operations for good or for bad with the aid of paramilitary groups, the place quite likely would have remained the same as it used to be 20, 30 years ago. Since that point, the government started a series of investments in the infrastructure of Comuna 13. The first and most important was the building that we have in front, the yellow-gray building right in front of us. That building used to be the jail for women in Medellín until 2003. That year they turned the building into a university. They moved the prison out of here, and that former jail, now university, was the first important investment from the social perspective to, well, try to keep the pacification of Comuna 13. Then in 2008 they opened this cable car. This was really important because, as you can see, this place is kind of remote, isolated, difficult to move around. But with this you can connect with the main metro system really quickly, and it also made the people feel more included in the city after being one of the most marginalized areas of Medellín for so many years.
Então, gente, acho que vocês viram, né, que ele estava explicando a história da Comuna 13 e ele estava falando que um dos motivos daqui ter se tornado um lugar turístico foi por causa dos grafites nas escadas, né, e isso começou a alavancar e também algumas presenças, assim, de celebridades internacionais. E agora a gente vai para a parte dos grafites, tô descendo aqui a escada, para ver como que, enfim, como para ver a arte daqui e tudo mais, né? E você pode perceber aqui, andando perto do metrô, né, que a gente pegou uma vanzinha para ir para o lugar das escadas, né? A gente consegue perceber o quanto a região ela é efervescente, assim, de comércio, tem muita coisa, né? Eu acho que é por causa desse turismo. É cheio de comércio, tanto o comércio barraquinha de rua, assim, e tal, quanto restaurante, né? Muito interessante ver. E aqui a gente chegou já na Comuna 13, lugar que é mais turístico, né?
Este show cuenta con una dinámica para iniciar, en la cual nosotros les gritamos 3, 2, 1, muy buenas tardes, y ustedes nos tienen que devolver el saludo con la mejor energía, ¿ok? Pueden gritar, silbar, aplaudir, empujarse unos con otros, arrojar la gorra, los lentes, el teléfono, la billetera, la ropa interior, lo que quieran. Lo que importa es que nos devuelvan el saludo con la mejor energía, ¿ok? So now in English, for tourists. First, thank you for coming to the Comuna 13, because with your visit you help us to continue developing our community. So thank you so much, okay? Now let me introduce ourselves. We are the Power of Life, one of the most signature group here in the Comuna 13. And we have an amazing show for you, the best performance, okay?
¡Ay, ay, ay! Mira los más exóticos, The Exotic Boys. ¡Ay, ay, ay! Choco, choco, choco. Yanka el problemático.
Internationally, so he is a coffee farmer. The hat, the poncho, the mules, and the machete are like his most important symbols. These people used to travel from town to town in state narrow trials, so the machete was very important for them.
esses 3 últimos grafites que eu mostrei, que estavam do ladinho do outro, é bem interessante porque, é como ele falou, é um mix das 3 origens da Colômbia, né? Que são os espanhóis, os africanos e os indígenas. E aí mostra, né, como que cada um deles influenciou essa nação. Oi, gente, acabei esquecendo de terminar o vídeo e a nossa saída de lá foi meio... muita coisa acontecendo, muita gente, porque vocês viram que lá é muito cheio, né? E começou a chover também, então achei melhor esperar para fazer num momento tranquilo a finalização. Bom, esta foi a Comuna 13, eu acho que vale até ir mais de uma vez lá. Eu achei assim de uma criatividade, cara, assim, de uma inteligência tão grande das pessoas que moram lá, transformar, do jeito que eles transformaram aquilo num polo turístico, né, que você vê assim, que tem de tudo lá, tem tanto, estabelecimentos extremamente sofisticados, quanto estabelecimentos mais simples, quanto... tem de tudo e tem todo tipo de pessoa, você vê, então é muito efervescente, né, e mostra a cultura das pessoas que estão lá, né, então, que moram lá, né, e você entra direto em contato com isso, e eu achei de uma beleza, assim, eu adorei, eu achei muito lindo, muito inteligente, e muito bonito também ver o que foi feito lá, né, que nem o guia falou que não é perfeito, que tem as questões que tem, como todo, tem as questões do lugar, assim, que alguns resquícios que ficaram, né, de tudo que aconteceu ali, né, nos últimos anos, mas no geral o que eles fizeram é muito incrível, só das pessoas conseguirem estar lá, participando, vendo atrações culturais, né, que a gente viu as pessoas dançando e tal, eu achei muito incrível, assim, toda a infraestrutura e que eles conseguiram proporcionar. Espero que vocês tenham gostado. Vão ter mais coisas sobre Medellín, que é uma cidade grande, uma cidade que eu estou adorando ficar, foi tão, não sei, assim, como eu sou de São Paulo, tem muita coisa que me lembra de São Paulo, mas eu achei uma cidade, assim, muito gostosa de andar, né, eu já comprei o meu cartãozinho para usar o metrô, super fácil, é só ir lá a gente tava na estação Poblado, né, então eu fui lá, pedi o meu cartãozinho, já carreguei meu cartãozinho, agora ninguém me segura, eu vou andar por Medellín inteira. Até o próximo vídeo, gente, beijo!